Today is July 9th, 2006. I am Jessica Clark. It is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Rugby, North Dakota. To start with, can you please state your full name?
Leo James Degenstein.
Okay. And the James, is that after anybody?
My dad.
Your dad, okay. When were you born?
1928, December 23rd.
Right around Christmas. Where were you born?
Chicago, Illinois.
Why are you in North Dakota?
My inherited land in North Dakota.
Did you ever hear any stories of your birth?
Well, in a way, because I was the only one born in the hospital, you know.
Really?
My had problems with me, and the other two, my sister and my brother, they were born at home, you know.
How far was the hospital from where your mom was living?
Not very far. Dad was working for Henry Ford in South Chicago, you know. And there was a hospital in that area, and it's still there to this day. Only they rebuilt it, I mean, but the same, you know, same with the church and the same house yet where Ma and Dad lived. It's still there, but they added a floor to it.
So how old were you when you moved out to North Dakota?
About 2.
Really? So when your dad came out, did he still work? Did he start to work for on a farm?
Start farming, yeah.
Was that the first time he started farming, or?
No, he came from a farming family. Grandpa Degenstein had moved up to Alberta, Canada, you know, and Dad and my uncle came back, and then Dad had to work someplace. So.
Did they not do well up in Canada? Is that why they came back, or?
My uncle and Dad, Andrew, it wasn't Dad. Dad was in 1918. Dad was 17, and Andrew was 4 years older. So you know they had their friends back here, and they had tough times up in Alberta at the time. So they came back. The two, the rest stayed up there. There's Degenstein's up in Canada, and can't believe how many.
What are some of your earliest childhood memories?
Oh gosh, I remember going with my uncle Casper Tuxer to Bismarck with their old Model A. There was a better Model A than Dad had and Ma. And we went down there with that old car, and then they stayed at my Aunt Mary's brother's place, I think it was. And then we took the car, Dad took the car, and we went up to Dodge, North Dakota, where Dad's brother lived, Andrew. This was after, it was 1932. I was 3 years old, you know, so, but I remember it.
Do you have any other early memories?
I remember one in February of 1932 when we came to town. Well, we stayed out here at Casper Tuxer's, my uncle's place. And then on the way home, it was storming real bad. And Dad took the rear end out of the car about halfway home, and we were going across the field someplace. And I remember us 3 kids, well, in 32 and in February, I just turned 3 in December, so you know how young I was. We were all standing on the seat, and the snow was starting to pile up. Ma was crying, so naturally we were all 3 crying. Dad had walked home to get the team to pull the car home, you know. And the next morning, I remember the car sitting there about 30 rods from the house, and that's where. And my mother had asthma real bad. How she got to the house without Dad carrying her, I don't know. But I guess the adrenaline flows when you're in an emergency. So.
How many kids were in the car at that time?
The 3 of us, Dolores and Kenneth and I. Dolores was older than I am.
How you were about 3? How old was Dolores?
Well, she was born at 27. She'd have been 5 already. She had a birthday in February. See, mine was in December, so it kind of.
And then how old was Kenneth?
Well, I think he was still breastfed, I think.
Okay, so he was a baby.
He was a baby, yeah.
You mentioned that your mom had asthma.
Real bad.
What would they do for asthma back then?
Well, Dad hauled her to the hospital every once in a while to get some air into her. I don't know. It was terrible. I don't know how she survived as long as she did. Being, we didn't have a telephone, no roads, a car wasn't worth a darn, you know. I mean, I remember several times where you had to take her to the hospital. And of course, she used a lot of medicine for that. I don't know what kind of medicine it was, for an inhalant or whatever it was. Yeah.
Was it really aggravated during the dirty 30s with all of the dust in the air and the dryness?
Well, it was always bad, even after the dirty 30s, you know.
Okay.
I remember they were gonna have another child after, I don't know, I think Kenneth was about 10 years old already. And I remember her sitting in the chair. I thought she was gonna die. She just blew where she, and Dad even said, "Kids, your mother's gonna die." And somehow he got her to the hospital again and saved her. She lost the child, but they had tough times, believe me.
How far was the hospital from your house again?
Well, when the first case here was, we were only a couple of miles from the hospital, but then we didn't have any roads or anything. Had to come in by team. But then we lived 10 miles out, you know, where.
Okay. So that took a while to get in.
Yeah, you bet it did.
Well, let's turn to I know that you checked grandparents on your checklist, so let's turn to your grandparents. Did you know your father's parents?
I knew Grandpa Degenstein. It's the only one of my grandparents I knew. The others were all dead when we came up here.
Okay. Did your Grandpa Degenstein come over from Russia or?
From South Russia, yeah.
Okay.
But you know, I always thought when they came over, they left from Odessa to come over here. But they left from that area all right, but they went by train back to Hamburg, Germany, and come over here from Germany, you know. Most of them did, you know.
So did your grandpa ever tell you what the journey was like or anything about life in Russia?
No, he told Dad, you know, of course, and Dad would relay some of that stuff to us, you know.
Okay. What are some of the things that you've heard about your grandpa's experiences?
You know, I used to wonder why they left Russia. But they were being treated like, I know what you say, like we used to treat the Indians up here in the hills. That's about the way they were being treated. But it was their own fault too. They went into Russia thinking they were going to remain Germans. They wanted their own German teachers. If they'd have intermarried with the Russians, we'd be Russians. You know? Mm-hmm. Not that I'm sorry that Grandpa came over here. I'm glad he picked the United States. And that was, can I tell you the history of my great-great-great-grandpa, Pete, and then his son, great-great-grandpa, Pete, they went into Russia in 1808, and they're buried in Russia. And my great-grandpa and grandpa came over from Russia, and they're buried up in Alberta, Canada. And my grandma's rests down here in Harvey, North Dakota since 1905. She died in childbirth, you know. She had Dad was 4 years old when she died.
Really?
All Dad could remember about that was there used to be a wooden bridge on the southeast edge of Harvey, and with a wagon with steel rims, you know what I mean? That you can remember going over that bridge, he said.
So, did your grandpa remarry after?
Yes. In 07, he remarried a woman who had, she was a Lindemann, but she had been a Volk. She was her maiden name was Volk, and she had married a Lindemann, and of course she lost him, and then she needed a man that, you know, the women couldn't go on Social Security or anything in those days.
Didn't exist, did it?
Yeah, I don't know how they did, but they had kids as long as they could have kids. I know that.
So after your grandpa remarried, did his new wife and him have more kids, or?
Yeah, about 10 more.
So how many did he have with your grandmother?
Well, I'll tell you, Dad, he used to tell this Chinaman up in Bow Island, Alberta. The Chinaman got a kick out of hearing him say how many kids he had, you know. And he'd count the ones that died in infancy, you know, and all, you know. But he said, she had 5, and I had 5, and we had 10 together. He said, then there was one more. And that's when the Chinaman did a somersault. That one more. Well, the one more, step-grandmother's first husband already had him when he married her. See?
Oh my goodness, so there was a lot of...
There was one more. And then he wound up marrying my mother's first cousin.
Really?
Yeah. Of course, they were all together in there, you know. And then they died down in Chicago, Illinois. They were living down there when the folks were down there, you know, already. I saw her and him a couple of times.
What was your grandfather like?
Oh, he was a fun man. He said he got to all the weddings because he could tell the dirtiest stories.
So he had a good sense of humor.
He had a great sense of humor. When he was 80 years old, he won a contest up there in Alberta at Bow Island doing a jig. You know, so he was in good shape. He worked until the day he died because he always had tough times and raised a big family, you know. There was a contrast between my other grandpa. He was a rich man, you know. He didn't have much money when he died, but he owned about 30 quarters of land, which the other Degenstein would have been happy with all those kids, you know.
Mm-hmm. So did you get to visit your grandpa a lot?
Twice in my life. In 1935, we went up there on this highway that didn't have a bit of pavement all the way up to Lethbridge, Alberta. There wasn't not one bit of pavement. The only thing that wasn't dirty gravel was through Minot. There was cobblestone. And I think Glasgow, Montana had a little stretch with cobblestone. Otherwise, bounced with that 28 Chevy in 1935, you know. We bounced all the way up there and all the way home.
And then when else? In 1935, and you said twice?
Then next time I saw him, he came down here in him and Grandma in 47.
Okay.
And they were here about 2 weeks.
What was it like when you went up to visit him in 1935?
Well, we were just little guys, you know. And he was building a room onto Aunt Phyllis, Dad's half-sister's place, you know, there where they lived on the farm, you know. So there's a bunch of people there at the time. We slept with Grandpa. That was great, you know, Kenneth and I. And then the next day he complained how much we kicked, you know.
So did your grandpa speak German?
Spoke German, Russian, English, and a little Norwegian too.
Really?
He used to work with a Norwegian. I knew the guy. It was Howard Larson here in town. His dad, see, Howard was, when he was born, his dad was 50 years old, you know, so that's how, you know. And he said that they made pulleys for the thrash machines. Do you know how those wooden pulleys were on the thrash machine? They bent they about this wide, and then they bent the wood until it was round, you know, and pressed it, you know, made pulleys out of it. And same with wheels, with the wooden wagon wheels, they made them too. And him, you know, he said he knew Grandpa, you know, he told me, and he said he had worked with him, you know, that way, building stuff like that. Nowadays you'd have to have a carburetor in your hand to be something, you know. In those days it was a piece of wood and bending it.
They were inventive.
But they had to be.
Mm-hmm. How about your grandparents on your mother's side? Did you know them?
Never, no.
Never met them?
All what I was told, you know, they were both dead. Grandpa died in 30, and then 31 we came up here, you know.
Do you know how your grandpa died?
Yeah, I think his heart gave out.
Okay.
He was only 71, took her, you know.
And what about your grandmother?
She had died in 1916 already. She was a Wooler. That's where I get my Wooler blood. Okay. And she died from cancer. I remember Ma saying how the terrible pain she had.
Did they come over from South Russia as well?
In 1884 already, yeah.
Okay.
They settled down in Eureka, South Dakota. And that's dry country down there, you know. I mean, hot and dry. And then in 1900, some of Grandpa's and Grandma's cousins especially, they lived up here already. So they came. He sold out down there and moved up here, you know. I remember in the family history where it says that were Grandpa and Uncle John and Uncle Anton and Uncle Martin. Uncle Martin was 12 at the time. The others were older. They chased the cows up from Harvey with horses, you know. Now, how did Grandpa buy them in Harvey, or did they bring them by train? See, there's no north and south is hard to get by with trains. But in those days, of course, those days, 1900, there wasn't hardly a train, you know.
So here's a question. How did your parents meet?
I imagine at some dance, you know, that's where we all met, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mom was the baby in the family, you know.
How many kids were on your mom's side of the family?
Oh, about 10, I think it was.
Okay. And your dad had countless.
And one more.
And one more. When you think about your parents, did they have a good marriage?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess like our marriage, too. I mean, if it isn't good, sometimes you make it good. If you got to make up your mind you want to be married. I never want to go out looking for another one, you know.
Took enough work getting the first one.
Yeah.
What type of a person was your father?
Dad was a kind-hearted man. He could get awfully mad, but he was a kind-hearted man. He cried easy. I do too. And then he had a sick wife all the time, you know. I don't know how he took that.
What was your father's name?
Jim.
Jim.
Well, he was baptized Joachim in German, you know. And then some called him James and some called him Jim. So I took on James for the middle name.
And then your mom's name is?
Phyllis.
Phyllis. And describe your mom. What type of a person was your mom?
Oh, she was probably the easiest going of the whole Tuxer clan. She was. I never saw her real mad or she'd hurt you or anything. She was just a good-natured person.
Were they strict parents or?
They tried to be, yeah.
Tried to be? Elaborate on that one. What does tried to be mean?
That meant you didn't get much money on Saturday nights, I'll tell you.
So tell me about a Saturday night. What was a Saturday night like?
Oh, gosh. Go to a movie. I was a darn bashful, you know.
You?
Yeah, I was, really. That's the toughest battle I've had in my life, is getting over that. And Maggie, of course, taught me how to get over that, you know, because she'll be the first one to the door all the time, you know. If somebody knocks on the door, I'd just soon hide. She runs for the door.
So you'd go to a movie. Anything else that you do on a Saturday night?
Not too much. We usually were pretty tired, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. What type of movies were playing when you were a kid?
Oh, gosh. We figured Gene Autry and Roy Rogers were our uncles, you know. You know, nowadays they show everything in the movie, you know. But in those days when they had the urge, then they sang a song, you know. Those two really did.
So a movie back then, would you go to rugby or where
Rugby,
would you go?
yeah.
Okay.
Ma used to unload us at the theater, then she didn't have us chasing after her, you know. And it was a nickel apiece, you know. Then one day we were going to go in and she said, "It's a dime now." Well, we knew we didn't have 3 dimes. So we went over to Bailey's and blew the money on candy, you know. And did we get it? You found out how strict the parents were.
So that the other shoe could drop.
Yeah.
So there was Dolores, you, and Kenneth. Was there any other children in the family?
No.
Just the 3?
Yeah.
That's a small family.
At that time it was, yeah. She had the smallest. Well, Aunt Katie didn't have any more either. She had only 3. Mrs. Vincent Jager was Ma's sister.
Okay.
But she was quite a bit older than Ma.
So what was it like with your sister? What type of relationship did you have with your sister when you were growing up?
Oh, we had our fights, and of course, if somebody would have done something to her, we'd have stuck up for her, you know that. And then she got rheumatic fever, when she was 13, and I had it too. But then when she was 26, she died,
Really?
It was TDY from Panama to Greenland. I was in the Army at the time when she died. When I found out that morning, that was the longest day of my life. Because here I'm in an outfit. Didn't even know the company commander, we were attached to him, we were going to go to Greenland again. We had been up there before. And then I didn't have any idea who the officer of the day was. And I had to have money to fly home. Oh, gosh. And on Sunday, now you get all that done. By golly, by dark, I was on a plane coming home. But it was a tough, tough time.
How did she die?
Heart attack.
At 26.
Yeah, her 5-year-old boy tried to wake her up, and he said he can't get her awake. And she was dead.
How many children did she have?
Just the one. Yeah.
Was she in North Dakota?
Yes,
Is she
yeah.
Buried,
She's buried out here, yeah. Okay. Her husband's still alive. He's 87 now.
Did he ever remarry?
Yes, twice.
How about your brother Kenneth? What type of a person was he when you were a kid?
Oh, I don't know. He wasn't much different than me. He had a way with Dad. He could get whatever he wanted, He was younger, see. So, of course, his marriage didn't last. Then he never remarried, so short history on that one. He's still farming, by the way.
Really? He's still out there working? Oh, my goodness.
We haven't got any other interests, What do you do,
What type of things would the kids do for fun on the farm when you were growing up?
Kick the can, play baseball or softball, hide and seek. That's about all we did.
With baseball or softball, did you guys have actual equipment,
No. If we found a round stick, we had a bat, and sometimes it was square.
How about a ball? Did you have a baseball, or would you make your own? Or
We usually had a ball of some kind. Sometimes the guts were hanging out, but.
And then for gloves, what did you use for gloves, or did you use anything?
We used these.
Did it hurt?
Oh yes. Oh yes. But you were a chicken if you didn't grab for it.
Let's see here. You also had religion checked, so we can talk about that for a while. You were raised Catholic, right?
Yep.
Okay. How important was religion when you were growing up?
Well, when we were growing up, you had to go to church every Sunday. If there were times where Dad didn't have a good enough car, I remember Father Close coming out there one time and he says, "By golly, Jim, I haven't seen you in Mass very often." Dad said, "If you had to drive in second gear around that hill over here, you wouldn't be there every Sunday either, But Father Close is long gone.
Was he an approachable father?
Oh yes, of course. As kids, we were afraid of him, And I'm not a very religious person, but I'm believing that maybe we should have a little more religion with these kids nowadays. And I'm not saying all kids are bad or anything, but they'll sure follow the bad one if they, when they get into that position.
What was church like on Sundays when you were growing up? Like when you walked in there, what was it like? Where did people sit? How did service go?
Well, just about the same as it is now yet. Our church here, see, that's just built in about, I don't know, about 20 or something, or 18? No, 28. 28 is when it was built. And it's been pretty much the same all the time. They're changing a little bit, but it used to be the Mass was, till I finally knew how to follow the Mass in Latin, then they switched it to English, and I didn't know where it was again.
You finally got used to it one way. So did they ever have services in German when you were growing up?
Not in Rugby here.
Okay.
Although one funeral, I remember one of the bishops, old Bernhard Bishop, when he died. And he was from that full church over there, and they had the funeral here because they lived in town then, you know. And I can still hear old Father. He was an old German priest anyway, and I remember him saying, "Kinder, this is your Mutter. Children, this is your mother." And I knew those people quite well, so.
What was a funeral like back then?
Well, it was sad then too, just about like now. Especially when we buried my sister. What I was going to tell you, when we got married, I think I had 4 uncles were up from Canada, weren't they? And their wives, and a great uncle and his wife came down. And I was proud. When you get old, and cry too easy. I guess I'm okay. Just one dab will do you. No, actually, this is the only church that I can remember that we ever went steady.
So you would come in, when you would come in for service, you would come all the way in from the farm?
Yeah.
And that was what, 10 miles?
10 miles or 11.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, but I remember like old Jack Wooler, he was Ma's uncle. They were about 10 miles out, but they used to go to church on Sundays once in a while with the team. Now you got to take a head start, you know. See, Barton didn't have a Catholic church. You know, we lived out there 6 miles from Barton, and then Willow City was another 9 miles up. So.
Where is Barton from here?
17 miles northwest.
Okay.
But there's nothing left except the lake.
It's all underwater.
Yeah, when the school closed and the bar closed, that's the end of Barton.
So, for church, when you would you sit with your parents, or how was the seating in church when you were growing up?
We always sat with Ma. Dad sat way back in the rear pews.
Was that because he wanted to, or is that where he had to sit?
That's the way those old guys were, you know.
Okay.
I guess they had to show that no woman had a hold of them or something. I don't know what it was. We always sat together, my wife and I, you know, when we were married, you know.
Do you know when that changed? Where?
Probably hasn't changed yet. I'll bet you there's still a lot of people where the man sits back there alone. You know, that's like some of these different religions where you make the wife walk behind you, you know. Boy, I'd have a time trying to keep mine behind there, I'll tell you.
This is going to be taken off the camera, but it would be very impossible. What about Sunday school? Was there Sunday school or things like that?
Used to be some, oh yes. I remember catechism, like kids who didn't see, after they had parochial school, then, well, even before, we had catechism in the summertime for the holy communicants and for getting confirmed. Yeah.
What were those like when you were a kid?
Well, I remember Father Witterholt throwing a book at one of us. I wasn't guilty that time. But
That time.
Oh, God, that's so long ago, you know.
Do you remember taking your first communion?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Was that a time of celebration for your family, or I mean,
Well, kind of, yeah. Oh, yes. They were proud of us, I mean, yeah.
How about names days? Were those celebrated when you were a child?
Oh, yes. Kospa, Melchior, Balzer. Casper, Melchior, and Balzer. That was the three kings, see. I suppose the three wise men is what it really meant. And out here, my Uncle Casper lived about 2.5 miles out west here. And I remember at least 2, maybe 3 times where this happened. I think it was in February, wasn't it? February, January when it was. And they celebrated it at Uncle Casper's place all the time. I don't know why he got stuck with it all the time, but maybe he volunteered. And we'd get to go along, and I can still see the musicians. They'd push the table in a corner, and they'd be sitting up on the table, and they'd play. And I just loved that German music, Then after a bit, we had to go upstairs and go to sleep, and we lay on top. There was a register where the chimney went, where the pipe went up, and of course we were listening there until as long as we could,
Did anybody in your immediate family play an instrument?
No. My Uncle August up in Alberta, he played for many, many dances. Him and Dorothy, his wife, too. She played the piano and he the accordion. And then Gabe played the guitar, the bass guitar. They made pretty good music. But they played for many years. But August is still alive. He's 92 years old now. But his this thing is slowing up here now. But his wife is still sharp as a tack, but she's only 83, I think.
You mentioned the house that you would lean down to listen to the music. What did the house look like that you grew up in? Can you describe it?
Oh gosh, they just pushed it together into a hole here into the basement. It wasn't much to look at, I mean, it looks like they had built 2 rooms, and then they added another 2 rooms with a lower roof, and that was my Uncle Casper's where they lived.
Did you have your own room, or did you have to share a room with your brother and sister, or how would that set up?
Oh, Ken and I, we slept together while we were home, at home. Dolores had her room, but like, my Uncle Walter Keller, he had 10 kids, and I remember there were 5 of us sleeping in the bed one time, and then Tony came home from a dance, and he crawled in too, so there were 6 of us. I don't know how we stayed in there, but all they needed was that oil that they pour on the sardines,
So how big of a bed are we talking about? I mean, are we talking like
way too small, way too small.
Okay.
Just an average bed.
How would you sleep? Would you all?
We had to crossways,
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How about blankets and sheets and things like that? What type of things would you use for covering?
Oh, we had blankets. I don't know what kind of blankets, but we didn't really need them. We were warm enough, I think.
All that body heat.
Yeah.
What did you use to heat the house when you were growing up?
We had out here, when we lived out here until 35, they just had a parlor furnace, And Dad darn near burned the place down twice with that. But they only keep the heat about 3-4 hours, and darn thing went cold on you, If you piled up too much in there, then it got too terribly hot before, it would go. Then out in that Barton country, then we had a furnace downstairs, and you could bank that up, and it'll keep you warm till morning, We got caught in a storm one time on the way home, and then of course we had to stay with some neighbors. And then the next day, Dad walked home. This was the 15th of March in 1941. Dad walked home, and then Ma had a great big Christmas cactus. That just full of flowers. And when Dad got home, that's the first thing he saw. It was just black. It just froze like a rock. But that was what was so bad about, well, even when we were married for years, you couldn't stay any place because you had to go home and bank that darn furnace all the time, you know. Maybe that kept us out of trouble, huh?
Growing up on a farm, what was it like? What was life like growing up on a farm?
Well, if you think back the way we live nowadays, it was lonesome. I know after I was through the 8th grade, well, I was home alone unless Ma would be home or Dad. But what I would do, I'd take my rifle and start walking. I'd walk looking to shoot a fox or a rabbit or anything. You know, that was my highlight. I mean, that and going to the movie on Saturday night. That was about it. And we could once in a while we'd catch some skunks too, you know. And they'd be worth $3-4 at one time. Can I tell you a little story about skunks?
Please do.
Well, my Uncle Pete Tuxer, he lived out there too, and he had a son by the name of Freddie. He had 2 or 3 sons, but Freddie was the oldest. And this was in the wintertime. And I was to the movie, and we used to have a bank night on Saturday nights. Between movies, you could win $100, you know. And then Otis Ingen, he started put the lights on. But all before that, I get ahead of myself. He was walking up and down the aisles, you know. And I smelled what he was looking for. And then when the lights came on, Otis never found what he was looking for. And then Freddie spotted me, and he came over and says, "Guess what? I didn't have to guess what. I could smell it. They got 10 skunks from out of a house, and they done a good job on him, you know. And you know, if you're the guy that got her, you don't even smell it that you stink like a skunk."
So would it take a lot of washing and bathing to get
Oh,
the
God.
smell off?
Yeah, it took a week to get it out, I think, or more.
How often did you guys bathe back then?
I hate to tell you, you're going to think we were dirty. Maybe a couple of times in the wintertime.
Really?
That's a fact. I still don't understand how. I don't think people stunk as bad as they do nowadays. I don't know.
Would your parents only bathe that often as well? Or?
They were in the same boat. Well, you took a sponge bath is what you did, you know. But oh gosh.
Oh.
Yeah, that was something else. When I got into the Army, that was luxury, a shower room with 28 spigots.
So you mentioned that you like to do hunting and that skunk tails were worth $3-4 or skunks were worth $3-4. Why were skunks worth that much?
For the fur.
What would they use the fur for?
Well, coats and everything else.
Really? Like
Oh yeah.
skunk
Oh, yeah.
coats?
And caps, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, like foxes and mink. Well, the mink's got a beautiful fur, you know, and weasels too.
So you said you had a rifle or did you have a shotgun?
No, a rifle. I used a rifle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was your dad a hunter when you were growing up, or?
Oh, he was, yeah. But Dad hadn't shooting geese. Dad hadn't shot a goose until he was 41 years old, and I got my first one when I was 16. So you know.
So the rifle. Who gave you the rifle?
It was Dad's rifle.
Okay.
I just started using it.
Who taught you how to shoot?
Oh, some of the neighbor kids, like Tufts kids, and then Joe Tuxer, Freddie's brother, he got to shoot the rifle, so I got to take a few shots with it. You learn it. I think it's a good thing to know how to shoot, because these poor guys in the Army, when they went in and had never fired a rifle before, that's tough. And those high-powered rifles, they're a lot harder to shoot than a .22, because 22 don't scare you so much, you know.
So were you a good shoot?
I was a pretty good shot, yeah. Did you see my arsenal in there?
I did. I think my husband's going to be jealous. Let's see here. So besides fox and skunk, what else would you hunt for when you were a kid?
Oh, rabbits, weasels, mink, muskrats. That's about it.
Do you still hunt today?
No, I gave that up quite a while ago. You know, we never did have, what do they call those animals again? Looked like a mink almost. River otter. They've got river otter up in the mountains now. They finally worked their way back from the Hudson Bay country. Now that's almost impossible to believe, but they follow the streams, you know.
So when you were growing up on the farm, what type of chores were you responsible for?
Oh, milk the cows. A lot of times we got to haul the manure. In fact, most of the time. Haul the hay. 1949, oh, that was a tough one, winter. We had snow about this deep on the level. And the hay out in the field, you know. Then to get at it, oh gosh. Every time we got back to getting another load, it had filled in with snow, you know. So we start building snow fences around the stack so a little ways off so it wouldn't drift so bad. Then the wind would really blow and fill it in worse than ever before.
So how much land did your father have?
Oh, he didn't have so much land, but he rented some. We were farming about 1,400 acres when I went into the Army.
And there was only 2 boys on the farm?
Yeah.
So you and Kenneth had a lot of work to do.
We had a lot of work, yeah.
Did you guys have a tractor or?
Yeah. Well, Dad, when I can remember back when Dad farmed with horses, you know. And well, you can't farm very much with 5 horses, you know. So he farmed about a quarter then, but then he bought a B John Deere, was pulled 2/16s, 32-inch drill. And I've told my wife many times, if somebody caught me moving that outfit over to Berwick like I used to when I was a kid, I moved it in 40 and 41, I had to move over there. They saw me moving an outfit like that, they'd think I was absolutely crazy. Because it's so small, you know. For that, we had a quarter and an 80 over there. Well, we worked on that 10 days at least, you know, to plow that. Now they go over there and by supper time they're done with the 1/4.
So what equipment did you have on the farm when you were a kid?
Well, we didn't have that much. We had a plow, a little disc, and a drill, about a 10-foot drill, 8-foot drill, I think it was. And with horses, you know. And wagons, you know. I never did use horses out in the field except when I haul bundles for thrashing, you know. That's where you want to work. Where you want to work, if you want to work, you did. The work was there. I'll tell you, that was hard work.
So what was threshing time like?
Well, that was fun because you got a bunch of guys together, you know. Like I said, it was lonesome in those days, and when you got a bunch of guys, there was always something going on.
Would that be the time of year that your dad would maybe hold you out of school to help around the farm? Or?
If he had to, yes, you bet.
So did your dad have a threshing machine, or did somebody around?
No, Dad hired him to thrash it, Joe.
Okay. So would you guys have to go help other farmers at that time?
Oh, yes.
To pay back for the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when it come to pay time, Dad took the money and spent it on the thrashing bill. We didn't even get to see the money, and it didn't even bother us. Nowadays, I think they'd shoot the old man if he'd done that to him.
So we talked about the farm equipment you had. What about animals? You obviously had cattle and horses. What other types of animals were on the farm?
No, that was about it.
That was it?
Besides the dogs and the cats and stuff.
Okay. So what type of crops did your dad?
Mostly wheat and barley, and we always had a cornfield too for the cows, you know. We did have chickens too, and we raised some turkeys too, by the way.
You raised turkeys. Were they mean?
I liked to see turkeys there. You can't imagine the difference between the one Mom would put eggs under a cluck, a hen, you know, and then this one turkey hen would sneak off and make a nest. And those, her young were so much nicer looking than the ones that we raised with the clucks. You couldn't believe that they were the same eggs, you know. But I guess the old turkey hen knew better what they should eat than we did.
Did you have a well on your farm?
Yeah.
How far was that from the house?
About 40 rods. I can still see Ma walk down there. She'd hang the meat down in the well to keep it cool, you know, before we had a refrigerator. And she'd have to walk them 40 rods all the time. Today we'd die from food poisoning if we had to live the way we did at that time. I think we were like the dogs are. We were immune to it, you know.
Okay, this is probably a stupid question. What's a rod for like 40 rods?
16 and a half feet.
Okay.
Then you take a half mile, and 16 and a half feet through a half mile is an acre, see.
Okay. Sounds good.
Now you know.
Now I know. It puts it in perspective here. So, was your mom a good cook?
Mom was a wonderful cook. And what was so hard to believe, she couldn't taste 9/10 of what she cooked. Because she was deadly, she couldn't take eggs, you know. What do you call it? Allergic, yeah. And that's what killed her in the end with eggs, too. They fed her up here at the hospital. She had to, see, before, if Ma, well, I must well tell her, getting ahead of myself again. They were up at Vincent Jagers one time, the folks, and they had to rush her to the hospital. I think they were 95 miles an hour. They brought her in. What had happened, one of the girls stirred the coffee with one of those wooden spoons that you make cake with, you know,
Uh-huh.
and there had been eggs in that cake, you know, and all she did was stir with that spoon. And,
Oh my goodness, she's that sensitive.
yeah. Well, it killed her. It killed her eventually.
So what did she eat when you guys were kids? I mean, because
She always knew what to make without eggs, you know. But that's why you couldn't go to a restaurant with Mom, because they didn't even know whether there were eggs in it or not, you know.
What did they do for allergies back then? I mean, was there any type of treatments or?
Couldn't have been too much. I remember her being sick. Then after a few days, then she'd come home.
You know, you've kind of hinted at this with your mom's asthma and the allergies, but what was health care like when you were a child? Like,
You mean there was health care in those days? I'm stone deaf in my right ear, and the first time a doctor looked at that was when I was 10 years old. That's the kind of health care we had.
so were you always deaf in your left ear?
Yeah, my right ear.
Or
Yeah.
right ear?
Yeah. And of course, when I went into the Army, the doctor says, "How do you hear?" I said, "Huh?" He says, "Go." God's fact. I'm not lying one bit.
When did you enlist?
In 51,
Okay.
January 51.
And how long did you serve for?
3 years. I was proud to serve for my country. I mean, but also you give the best years of your life to your country, whether you get shot at or not. I was one of the lucky ones I didn't get shot at. I got from Panama to Greenland twice, and Panama for a year and a half, you know.
How old were you?
22 when I went in, 25 when I got out. And then all the girls, the right age, you know, they're already married, you know. So I had to find when I was about 6, almost 7 years younger.
Hey, keeps you going.
Yes, yeah.
So what was the service like when you were in the service? What was it like?
Well, they treat you pretty tough. I mean, you soon know who's boss, and you don't talk back either. I'll tell you that much. I think that'd be the greatest for an 18-year-old a lesson. Oh boy! Not that I'm saying they should have it, but I think they'd be good for the kids.
So what made you enlist?
I was 1A.
1A.
That meant I was going to be drafted.
Oh.
So I could tell the guys I decided to go with, and you didn't have to force me in,
I enlisted. I wasn't drafted.
That's right. That's right.
Well, when you enlisted, where did they ship you off to?
Well, first we went to Thule, Greenland, which is 76 degrees north, 76 degrees and 7 minutes north. The Arctic Ocean is above 75. So I've been north. And then we went back to California, back to Virginia or New York then. Then we went to Panama. I was down there a year and a half. And then I volunteered to go up to Sandström, Greenland the last time, and when my sister died. That was something else.
Did your younger brother Kenneth, did he also serve?
No.
Kind of jumping around here, but going back to food, you said your mother was a good cook. What were some of the favorite meals that she made?
Cream chicken and mashed potatoes. Oh, God. And rice and chicken. There's nobody in the world could cook the way she did. I don't know.
How about a favorite dessert?
Well, I still like lemon meringue pie about as well as anything. And my mother used to make raisin pie, too. Oh, gosh, that stuff was good. Oh.
So what about some traditional German dishes?
Well, I didn't like borscht. Well, of course, that's Russian. Borscht is Russian vegetable soup, But Ma and Dad loved it. German dishes. Well, Fleischkichle. Geschnittene Nudel. Yeah, they made their own noodles like... I don't know what they used flour and stuff to. Then they'd roll it, and then Ma would cut real, just like shoestrings, Now, geschnittene Nudel means cut noodles, That's what it means in German. Oh, there's bean soup. Oh, did she make bean soup? Of course, we wouldn't be sitting this way then. But
So what was something that she made that you just could not stand? You just thought it was the worst thing in the world?
Well, her borscht, I didn't want to be near that. Or anytime she cooked cabbage, and Dad loved cabbage, like the pigs in the blankets,
Mm-hmm.
Dad loved them, and if I could smell it from a half a mile away, I think, that when she's cooking cabbage. It leaves off of course, there's a lot of food that way. Take a boiled egg and smell it once. They don't smell so good either. And I love boiled eggs,
So do you still to this day not like the
Yeah, to this day.
cabbage?
I don't even dare try and taste it because I know I like too many foods, as you can tell,
So what about sauerkraut? That's like the German dish.
No, I hate sauerkraut. Yeah.
And you say you're German.
Yeah, I know. I might be the German.